Good morning. Good morning from
Good morning.
the Talking Shadows. Now, the shadows today are going to present the whole hour. It's going to be amazing. But actually, no, let's change that. Let's just make it a few seconds. So, good morning, everyone. We're outside today. It's very windy. Only going to be here a couple of minutes because we're going to go inside and meet someone very special. But just before we do, there's a plant here that over the last kind of sessions I haven't talked about, and it's this one here. There's a couple of them, and it's quite, oh, can you see that? Have you got them?
Yes.
So it's quite funny because this morning I was at the front of the house, this is at the back of the house, looking for, there was just one of these plants. I'll tell you what it is in a minute, and a very special person that we're about to meet, he opened the window and he said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, well, there was just the most perfect smooth sow thistle that I wanted to show people this morning, and I swore it was there, but it's not there anymore. And he said, "Oh, yes, I fed that to the guinea pigs." So, yeah, I had a look around and I found another one. It's very common, so it's a bit like dandelion, very much like dandelion, except it has, and I think it's too early actually, it's too early even to see any flower buds, but it has multiple dandelion-like flowers on the stem. And I'm going to make something very, very quick with this. So come inside and meet my guest for today. And we're going to talk about how to work with wild food. By the way, if it's windy, just in these couple of minutes, don't worry, because it won't be windy for long. And I haven't got my amazing wind protector reed mace fluff on the end of the phone today. Started again. So I got a few things earlier, and at the end, going to knock up a nice kind of salsa verde and just dressed noodles. Really simple, lovely way of using fresh wild greens raw, even some that you couldn't normally have raw. And the other thing I'm going to get on the go, something I have every day, and it's partly to do with what we're talking about today, which is how you store your wild foods and other foods, actually. So this is dried elderflower. I'm going to put a couple of, I'm quite generous with this because I got all this, I think it's got a date on it. By the way, this is very rare for me to label things. We might meet someone, well we will meet someone in a minute, that I'm suggesting is more organised with their labelling, but I'm not quite sure, we'll see. So, some elderflower. I'm just going to put this in the coffee thing. What do you call these ones, Sarah? Coffee?
French press.
French press. Leave that a bit. And come with me into the larder. I hear a bit of noise in there. Hope it's not the mice.
Hello, brothers. This is my home. It's where I live.
So here we are. Not much room to move around, which is good. Not much room for the mice to move around, but an excellent place for storage. So yeah, Tristram, I haven't introduced her. Tristram, would you like to...
Hi, I'm Tristram Stuart. I'm something of a food waste fanatic, and I look for opportunities to turn what would otherwise be wasted into delicious morsels at every corner of the garden, every corner of the woodlands, and even on the roadsides.
Yes, as we both do. That's yeah. I mean, we have lots of similarities in the way we kind of approach food. I mean, I don't know what you kind of think about it, but obviously, like wild plants, they're there also for the wildlife and you know, the insects and the animals and the whole issue in a way. in a sense that there's like an abundance that we could be using, but generally we're not. I mean,
logically that doesn't work, but the obsessive way in which I read, I feel it's a moral obligation to pick every blackberry in every hedgerow anywhere within 5 mile radius. There's an itch.
Does it keep you awake at night?
It does. And you know, if there's a roadkill deer, it is pretty much an obligation to go and pick it up and turning it into food. It's a different order of magnitude of a problem compared to where you literally have food that has been produced using agricultural processes, all the deforestation and inputs, and then that food gets locked into a supermarket skip and is rendered unavailable to any human or animal or any other organism that might want to use it other than an anaerobic microbe in a landfill site to turn it into methane. That's a different order of a problem, and one that really aggravates me. At least those blackberries out there are bird food, insect food, and at the very least are going to drop back into the soil and go back into the system. So it doesn't aggravate me to the same extent. Crops going to waste in farmers' fields and no way of getting that out of the field to people who need it. That bothers me much more than wild food. But definitely I have that instinct, that hunter-gatherer. I've got to get that food.
Yeah, and that's like the whole gleaning network that you have as well. I mean, it's that aspect of hunter-gathering and just foraging and gleaning. It's all it's all so connected, isn't it?
Picking blackberries has an unadulterated satisfaction. That hunter-gatherer that we all are, those 2 million years of hominid evolution where that's what we were wired to go and do, full satisfaction there. When I go to a supermarket skip and get a whole load of food out of it, that kind of grunt of satisfaction is definitely there. Free food in huge abundance. But there's also that outrage, and that's a different thing. I don't get outraged when I'm picking blackberries.
Absolutely.
So the question is, you can go out and get all of that food, but it's all very well gorging on it once. You've got to plan for the whole year. And you've just been making a salsa verde out of thistles.
I'm going to do that.
Okay. And that's really good because we're in the springtime and green lush vegetation is what's available. But what about the calories? What about the rest of the food needs? Nature has given us that too, just at a different moment.
Exactly. So it's like two things going on. One, there's an absolute abundance of wild greens out there, and the kind of joke of nature, but also like the wonderful generosity of nature is it throws up so much in the spring. So it's brilliant to use all these things fresh, but how do you make the most of that abundance now? And that partly comes down to a whole load of techniques involving preserving, whether it's drying or pickling or home canning using the pressure cooker. So that applies not just to those things that are abundant but perhaps aren't the substance of our diet, but things I think you're going to talk about, which literally is the meat, both literally and metaphorically. Right.
So what should we do? Should we go on a little guided tour of the
I think
line?
so. Let's go on a guided tour.
So I want the first thing to bear in mind is that we are in mid to late April, which means that since last autumn we've had several months of feasting on the plenty that we laid up over the last autumn. The fact that we're in lockdown now and not going shopping very much, that we didn't foresee anything like that. This is just our annual practice. And when it comes to moments like this, moments of crisis, you do start to realise that the layers of experience and skills that one has built up over the years, actually there could be scenarios where this is a really important set of skills to have.
I think you and I now probably feel like, I don't really want to sound kind of smug and self-satisfied.
You sound very smug.
But it's look at this. But it's that, given the hardship that could be now if we didn't do this. When I think about all the stores that we have collectively, there is this real sense of confidence and being having supported oneself by pre-planning, even though it wasn't quite consciously done for these difficult times. It's more it's more of an attitude, really, that we don't want to waste food and we want to preserve as much as possible. So yeah, should we
Yeah, let's get on. I mean, first object we get to is actually your industrial quantity of wild garlic. Have you already done this?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, right, okay.
I haven't done any. I would say, did you see the there was a potato masher?
Oh wait, I took it out. Yeah, sorry, did you want it?
I wanted it.
I was like, what's the potato masher doing?
Because I knew I was
going
going
to get it.
No, I'll get it. I'll get
It's
it.
by the coffee.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Fergus is going to tell you why he's dribbling on my apples, but we'll come back to that. Let's go to canning, because canning is a widely misunderstood process. A lot of people, I've just started on canning and then we'll come to lactofermenting wild garlic, yeah? A lot of people think that kilner jars, or mason jars as they're known in the USA, or le parfait if you're in France, are just airtight containers for storing dry goods. That is a real erosion of their actual design property. The actual design property of the kilner jar is to cook products inside it. And that is what we have here and here. These are essentially tin cans, what you see in any shop, but made of glass, reusable year after year. And what we've done here is cook, in this case mushrooms, in this case greens, and in this case fruit, in the jar itself. And by raising the temperature so that the product on the inside, oh, and here, meat, right? We raise the temperature on the inside of the jar so that everything on the inside is sterile. And then we screw top down or clip down the lid, and as the product on the inside cools, you get low pressure vacuum here, it sucks the lid down, and then the inside is basically preserved for decades. I've found fruit preserved in a post-war French mansion that hadn't been touched for decades and decades, about 50 years, and the plums on the inside were still perfectly good to eat. They will last there until the rubber erodes. And that is the most amazing technology. You don't need added sugar, you don't need salt, you don't need anything. You just apply heat once, and the stuff is good for years and years and years. And it is by far the most important preservation technology for me. It's been around only for a couple of 100 years, this exact technology, this way of canning stuff. But you can put meat, vegetables and fruit in.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, it's a very naive thing, but I mean, years ago when I was like reading about home canning, I come across like reference to home canning. It's like, well, I don't want to can things. I don't have a can. But I guess it's more kind of born out of kind of use initially, I guess, from the States. So is it? I don't know. I just wonder why they use the term
survived.
But when they use the term canning, I don't think glass. But essentially, it just means preserving things in jars.
Yeah, bottling is another name.
We would say bottling, I guess, in the UK. Yeah. And we'll show you the pressure cooker later, because I think, okay, we could put lots of stuff in the freezer. We could dry stuff. That's another thing we'd talk about. But the freezer, I'll show you, it's full of venison. There's no room for anything else. So these methods that don't require like a freezer or other kind of high energy storage are so brilliant. So we'll show you the pressure cooker that we've done this in later.
Right, numerous advantages over the freezer. Number one, just one hit of heat, which if you want to be pedantic, you can actually get out of wood that grows on trees. One hit of heat, don't have to have a freezer on all year round. Plus, it's so visible. You know exactly where your spinach is. In the bottom of the freezer, we've all seen that. It gets lost at the bottom of the freezer. You forget about it and you find it 5 years later when it's already got freezer burn. It looks beautiful. It invites you to feast on it. And as I say, the containers are reusable year on year.
There's someone asking if you can use any glass jars.
No. You can use any glass jars if the preserving technology on the inside of those glass jars is sugar, vinegar, or some other preservation technique. So here you have plum chutney, apple chutney, plum jam. All of those things have been preserved using another preserving agent, the vinegar or the sugar or some other process, lactofermentation, for example. Right? But to do a really properly secure vacuum seal that will hold itself for years and years, and that you can cook on the inside of, you really do want to get one of these objects which has been designed for that purpose. You can, of course, just cook applesauce, put it in an apple jar, sometimes in a normal jam jar, turn it upside down. It is the same technology, it's less reliable. And the thing about canning is, because you're going to leave it and there's no other preserving agent in there for months, potentially years, you do kind of want to be sure that you've done it right. Because on the inside, if you've not done it quite right, if something gets in, you can get an explosion if some yeast or something goes in there and starts fermenting. And when it comes to vegetables and meat, there's something even riskier, and that's botulism. Botulism thrives in anaerobic environments, and you need to be super careful that you haven't put inside one of these cans something that's going to kill you and your family. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen every few years. So shall I go on to like the pressure canning versus not pressure canning, and then we'll come to lactofermented.
Okay, I just say because it's going to run off and drip down.
Yeah, you are actually dribbling on. Fergus is dribbling on all my canned apple sauces at the moment.
Well, the great thing about
can you explain yourself?
The great thing about these glass jars is that they don't take on flavours from the outside too much. But also, so what we've got here, what's going on here? Look at this is. The fact that, again, like using these flip-top kilns rather than those for lactofermenting wild garlic, using like the lactobacillus bacteria that's naturally on the leaf, is that if, like has happened here, you forget to burp them every day, like I've burped by burping, I mean, like that. Did you hear that one? That's just letting like the carbon dioxide out, and I've done it for all those this morning, and I forgot that one. So. But the good thing is, if I did it in this one and I forgot to do it, possibly the pressure would build up too much. I don't know because these are screw top. But these ones, if the pressure builds up too much because you forgot to burp your jar, you just get some mess. Have a look at this one because this seems like really obvious, but I feel embarrassed to say I only thought of this like this week after doing this for about 15 years. Like, you see, this one's been pushed up by the liquid. So normally what I would do, get a rolling pin or something and stuff it down. Of course I didn't realise that in doing that sometimes you cause a lot of mess anyway because you're replacing the volume with the volume of the rolling pin, which is where this comes in because you're not doing that anymore. See? So you can just go like that. And then there's no excuse for garlicky juice on Tristram's delicious salami, which I think would go very well. But yeah,
they do go perfectly well. Can I just ask, do you need the air seal at all when you're doing lactofermentation? Could you just, because normally you do lactofermentation in a crock, don't you, Fergus?
I find the thing about a crock, particularly with like strongly things that have got a strong smell, like wild garlic, like it can attract flies, and then they can just lay their eggs around the edge, and then bacteria comes and...
I lost some last year.
Yeah, I did. I lost a big batch doing that. The thing I've also found about this is that I think that build-up of carbon dioxide actually in there is preserving in itself.
Right.
That's just my feeling about it.
A bit like with any other fermentation, for example, cider. That is a beautiful sight. I mean, this probably the nicest thing. Did you already do this, Fergus? Your dried lacto-fermented wild garlic on
I meant to go, yes, I did that in another one. But what I meant to say is that, occasionally, like, I give out lots of advice about doing this and doing it properly and keeping it under the liquid. And sometimes I forget like that. So like this one, it's been going a couple of years and I did forget. I've started using it. I forgot to push it down, and it hasn't gone off, but try that. It hasn't gone off.
So if you're degree
but the flavour
definitely hasn't gone off.
Hasn't gone off. The flavour's not as wonderful. I would say I'll give this like 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. It's not 10 out of 10. So this is exactly the type that I would squeeze out the liquid. Make a liquid seasoning like that, mix it with other things, salad dressings, and take all this and dry the leaf content and make a delicious seasoning for just sprinkling on things, coating cheese, doing all sorts of stuff. So that's the thing. So I think when you have a kind of mindset of kind of not wasting stuff, it gives you, you get kind of creative, don't you? And you think,
Totally.
well, what am I going to do like this? Like you know, what do you do with food that's been, as you say, at the bottom of the freezer for like 10 years that most people would be throwing out? We enjoy it, but we combine it with something like this, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So, what else should we look at?
Well, I was actually just in the midst of warning people about botulism.
Yes.
Shall I round that off and then we
go
can
on.
move on from canning?
Yeah.
So canning with fruit is a really good place to start, because all you need is one of these, fruit, and you stick it in a jar, and then you can cook that either in a water bath, a normal pan, submerged in water up to there, or you can do it in an oven, just so long as you make sure that it's got to a sterilisation temperature all the way through. And there are lots of charts and graphs and stuff that you can look up online to tell you how long to leave a 1 litre or half litre or 5 litre jar of stewed plums. That's how big they get. I mean, this is plums from like 3 years ago or something like that I foraged on the roadsides in Hackney in London. And you know, you give it a certain amount of time and it'll cook, and it's really low risk. You then cap it off and it goes down. Moving up to meat and greens and other vegetables and mushrooms, these are low acid. They don't have the acid that plums and other apples and fruit like that have in them. That means that it can be occupied by botulism, and for that reason you need to make sure that you've brought the temperature inside these jars to a higher temperature than 100 degrees centigrade, which means you have to pressure cook them, and I'll show you my pressure cooker in a second. But if you don't do that, spores of botulism can survive, and then you've got a toxic mix on the inside of your jar. So greens and meat, you need to pressure cook them. In fact, the Americans do this. The British government doesn't give advice about how to do it, but the USDA does. Plenty of advice out there about how you can preserve meat and vegetables in cans. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. It is a really good way. I got some of this. This is orich or chard from last year. I got some of this out and added to a pasta sauce just the other day, and it's, you know, it's greens for the whole year. So that is canning. As you can see, I'm mildly obsessed by canning. I have cherry plums, apple, quinces, pears, more pears down here, damsons. Sorry, you preserved these damsons, didn't you?
Yes.
In fact, you did good many of these different bits of fruit in here.
You see the way this is here? I've got a similar situation going on an hour and a half drive away in my mother's cellar. And a lot of that, like the labels have fallen off. But I was there a couple of months ago, and I found something with a really kind of hard to read label, and I saw it was like 15 years old, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. And I opened it, and it was some damson puree. It was just perfect, because I've done it like this, so it lasts a long time. What should we move on to?
I'm just going to finish on my tomatoes because I forgot them, because we had, what, 110, 120 tomato plants last year, and I was almost worried that we had too many, but we canned a very great many of them. We condensed them down, so we leave them bubbling away, so they're twice the concentration of stewed tomatoes, and then we can them. And this is all we have left. We had scores of these at the end of last tomato season. Now our tomatoes are about this high. I reckon we're going to just make it before the first tomatoes come in.
Yeah, just bringing that back to wild food for a moment. It's a wild food that doesn't get used so much in this country, but there's a tradition elsewhere in the world of using this plant, and that's black nightshade. Now, I'm not talking about deadly nightshade, but black nightshade. And I'm always scattering the seeds around because I've had the desire, and I've never done it, to get the small fruit, because they're slightly tomatoey, and make a jar just like that. Never done it. But one day I will be able to gather enough of the fruit to do that.
There is wild food on the inside of many of these. This is wild garlic, canned wild garlic. I can pop that out any time of the year. That's honey fungus, horse mushroom, parasol. You know, you can do this with wild food as well. In fact, I will say, just for the sake of completion, the USDA does not recommend wild mushrooms in canning.
Is that because of that they're worried about people getting misidentification, or just because of the
Good question. I don't know why they don't. I've done it. I've eaten the mushrooms.
yeah.
End of story. So that is canning. What next? Oh, lactofermenting meat.
I want to tell you, something happened. I won't tell you the full story because it's a bit graphic, but a few days ago there was a deer killed on the road. My housemate came back. It was very fresh. Literally, he'd seen it happen. We dashed out. I was, as I often do, and this is kind of quite interesting. It's like, you know, and it's a classic, don't count your chickens before they hatch. I was on the way because there was a deer on the road, thinking about salami, thinking about jerky, thinking about all these things that I could store and make from this deer. We were there within 10 minutes. There was a bloody tyre track on the road where a car had obviously picked it up, reversed, gone. So, you know, there are a lot of people around that also do think how to make the most of something which, you know, initially is quite tragic, quite sad, but we do make the most. And this, what Tristram's going to show you now, is so exciting, and that's what I was hoping to do with this deer, but alas, another time.
It wasn't me, Fergus. I did steal your south thistle. First thing this morning, I found Fergus like creeping around in the bushes looking for something. I said, "Are you looking for something?" He said there was a south thistle here.
I know.
Just yesterday, I said, "Yeah, I picked it."
I've already said how outraged I was about this.
Well,
I said how wonderful it was that the guinea pigs, which are also edible, especially when they're fed on south thistles.
Absolutely, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Laying up stores,
exactly.
just like this pig was eating waste food, and now is stored in a jar. Eventually, you'll get to eat that south thistle just indirectly in the tissues of the guinea pig.
Yeah. So this is really exciting.
This is a roadkill deer.
Just going to get some.
Can you see it all done here? Now, this beautiful substance. Shall I get it off the hook so you can have a proper look? Looks scary, doesn't it? That is mouldy meat. But every bit of mould there is part of the curing process of this deer. The basic process of this is lactofermentation. It's a salami, and the Europeans have been doing dry curing, air drying, lactofermented meat sausages for centuries and centuries. And the curing agent here is salt. And you literally stuff the gut. This is the middle from a cow, but you can stuff sausage, pig guts, or pretty much any gut. I imagine you can use deer gut.
I've used badger gut. Yeah. So actually, I would say, like, you know, working with kind of wild guts, if you like, that you found. I mean, you've got to be absolutely stringent in kind of how you clean them. I clean them like on the inside. I turn them on outside, but it's great fun. Like you put them under the tap and fill them with water. And
turning them inside out is the number one thing. You won't find good instructions online. It tells you to use a wooden spoon.
Yeah,
nonsense.
Scraping it
Stick it over a tap. Turn on the tap. Turns inside out. I've done that with pigs, and then use a credit card to wipe all the mucus off the inside. It's not a nice job. Takes quite a long time. There you are. Basically, this is 100%, potentially 100% wild food. You get a deer, or whatever animal you've got, you stuff it inside a gut with some salt, which is also wild food if you know how to find it, and hang it out to dry. Now, I will confess that in these salamis, though not in those, there is also curing salts, which are nitrates and nitrites, and again, the purpose of those is to counter the possibility of botulism. If you just use normal sodium chloride table salt, you haven't put in place one of the barriers you can use to prevent botulism. This is the loin of a pig inside the bung of a cow.
Can we look at this
furry stuff?
I love this because, you know, I'm rarely challenged by kind of foods, but I mean, look at this. I mean, I was kind of horrified. I'm not sure it's picking up how kind of furry and hairy and mouldy this is, but mould can be our friend.
Absolutely. These moulds, particularly this white and this grey stuff, is a penicillin mould that has occupied this space to the exclusion of other moulds. And what it's doing here on the surface is using up any oxygen that you don't want on the inside of your sausage. It's being part of the drying process, drawing moisture out of the sausage, and then arguably most importantly of all, each and every one of these moulds is developing flavour on the inside. And I am telling you, these salamis, which are the pigs that we reared on food waste, supermarket waste, all legally permissible supermarket waste. I didn't say that, by the way. Legally permissible form of foodstuffs. Legally permissible form of foodstuffs. It is still permitted. This is venison roadkill. I picked up the deer on the side of the road, minced it up. I had some surplus back fat from my pigs, which you can see in these nice discrete lumps. I spent a lot of time and care ensuring that this fat would stay in its nice solid lumps, mincing it on a coarse grinder and stuffing the sausage while they were still really, really cold. I haven't actually tasted one of these yet. It's been pretty much a month now since we hung these sausages up. I reckon we take these to the conservatory with a bit of pickled cucumber or something and have a taste, because I haven't been inside one of these sausages yet.
Yeah, it's there's a question there, and Tristram doesn't know this, but because I've never made this, and we were going to go through the whole process. I was asking him kind of about like stages, how long it could take, because I was wondering if we could do the whole process within an hour. Because the question that's just come up there is, do you mince the meats first?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can take you step-by-step guide, and Fergus, next time we get a deer, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because although when you asked me how long does it take, the 2 or 3 hours that I told you, that was for stripping down the whole carcass.
Yeah.
But you could easily rip out a shoulder and the stomach, which is what you would normally mince, the belly, mince that and get it into a sausage casing easily within an hour. If we're not trying to do a whole deer, which is what I did here.
So we might take you through the whole process if the opportunity arises, because it's a great one.
But I really can say that in terms of the preservation of protein and calories and the culinary joy that has arisen as a result of mastering the art of salami making, I would put it right at the top rank. It's been scaring the living daylight out of me for years and years and years, but to now confidently say that I can turn an animal into something that I can hang at ambient temperature, chuck around, take a slice off at any time, and enjoy. Oh look, this one's even started. We can take a bite.
Oh yeah, we'll take some out.
We'll take some out.
So,
look at that. Look at the middle of that. Oh my God.
Would say is, I love to. So I really like the fact that you said the art of doing this, because I think whenever you're working with bacteria, molds, kind of yeasts, they are wild. So there is a kind of unpredictable element to it, but it's kind of like letting the wild it's not exactly taming it, but it's letting it work for you. So it's there's a little bit unpredictable, and that's the art. But both you and I, we kind of like the details, like the science behind it. So I saw you had this book the other day, and I was just blown away by how good it is, because it really goes into like the science of what's going on and like the safety. And this one, like, niche but wonderful. The art of making fermented sausages.
Yes.
Isn't that good?
I wish I'd read it before I started making sausages.
But I know, but you know what? I mean, this is a thing. I would say the opposite, because sometimes, I don't think you've made many mistakes, have you?
I'm alive.
You're alive. And look how healthy he looks. So, but I think sometimes it is a wonderful thing to kind of work it out yourself first, and then you do stuff like that, and then you smugly think,
it's coming across really bad books.
Yeah.
That frustrate me because they give ingredients that they don't really understand what they're doing, and there are inconsistency. That book is nice and consistent.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
So, fermented sausage, canned, fermented, dried. Nice and easy. We both have dehydrators. You don't need dehydrator though. In fact, these ones I can tell were dried in the oven. This slightly darker brown is a caramelization that I get. These are the apples. I preserve a lot of these in a lot of different ways. I think apples are one of the most amazing organisms that we have in our agricultural system. Dried apples.
And also, like when you dry them to a crisp, And there's lots of places where my mother lives in Herne Bay on the downs there. They are just like apple trees, like growing wild, and it's partly just along like the walks by the sea. Over years, people have just thrown like apples and pears, and they're all over the place.
Right.
So you can.
That is a crunchy apple crisp, picked in October, eaten in April, and it's still packed full of apple flavour.
I want to quickly show people the dehydrators.
Oh yeah,
because there are many dehydrators that you could, and we'll show the pressure cooker as well. There's many dehydrators that you could use. Well, yeah, it's quite funny. I just quite often discover that Tristram and I, we have the same things. Not like the light.
Background light.
Yeah, we've got the same ice cream maker, the same. But, you know, if you're really going, you don't need 2 dehydrators, but if you really are...
Wait, focus.
Yeah.
That's my door on your dehydrator.
Yeah. And look at this horrible, dirty door of Tristram's, and my lovely clean door, which is on his. But, so, I think the reason these ones are so nice is that they have, how many do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trays, and you can set them from, can you see that, Sarah? Yeah. You can set them from 35 degrees up to 68. So you do everything from herbs, living foods, raised bread, making yogurt, vegetables, fruit leathers. Oh, we'll talk about that in a bit. Meats, fish, jerky.
So compared to any of the other dehydrators that I'm aware of, readily available on the market, the scale at which you can operate on these ones is, compared to those circular ones that can fit a few mushrooms in, if you mean seriously to preserve quantities of food, this is just acres and acres of space in one of these. We've got 2 of them, we're really lucky. It's only occasionally that we are in competition for space. During the mushroom season, it gets a little bit hairy. Fergus's mushrooms haven't finished, my tomatoes need to go in.
And also Tristram's a little bit more organised than me. What do you think, washing machine? Yeah, washing machine, think so. Because his is empty, whereas actually mine is still stuffed with things I haven't dealt with. But you know, it's kind of interesting. Let's have a look what's here. This was just from the other day, so that's my excuse. This is the oxidised bramble leaf tea that I was making in the other video. It's just dried. I tried to finish off the oak one I was talking about in the conservatory, and confession, it wasn't warm enough and it went mouldy. So dehydrators can be great, or I should have done it on a sunny day. We've got acorn and seaweed noodles, dried to a crisp. Left in there. We've got, something weird and experimental. I do lots of experiments. Now, I was looking at my fridge. I'm not going to show you my fridge because it's really embarrassing. Isn't it, Sarah? Sarah won't even go near it. It's notorious here. You open it and there's some strange smells that drift out and fill the house. Occasionally, I go through it and I look in the back, and I went in the back. Can you guess what that is? Be an absolute miracle if anyone knew what it was. You can't, because it's just something that's been blended. Right. Well, I'm not sure this should be eaten, because as I call myself a wild food experimentalist. But basically, I talked in another video about making beech leaf noyau, like a liqueur from the young beech leaves. But I also mentioned how you can think about plants, wild food. It's got some kick. It's got some kick, got some chili in there. Over time and different parts. So I was interested in the fact that you can eat the leaves and you can eat the beech nuts if you can get there before the squirrels. But what about transitional stages? That's what I was interested in. So I had immature beech nut cases that were lactofermenting in the fridge for 2 years. And I thought, you know, they're a bit hard, a bit tough, hasn't quite worked. Yeah, I really don't want to throw them away. So I just blitzed them up with a tiny bit of rice flour and some chili and some salt. And this is it. So it kind of works. It works.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for nourishment.
Yes. If you're looking for, and the other thing, look, these are kind of nice. These are Birch Catkins cooked in Marmite, a bit like Twiglets from this year. So
And that is actually not too bad.
So that's dehydrators are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Where would we be without them? Like, oh,
Well, we'd be in a pressure cooker, wouldn't we?
where would we would be over here with the pressure cooker. Oh look.
So, unfortunately, these are not readily available in the UK. I got this. I can't even remember. I think from the USA. Where, as I say, the technology subsists. As you can see, it's big enough to fit several kilner jars, double stacked. So I've got big ones at the bottom, little ones stacked on top. Bit of water at the bottom. Then on the heat, and this tells you the pressure that you've got to, which tells you the temperature, and you can look up all sorts of guides that tell you how long to cook any individual item and at what pressure.
Do you know what's been a game changer for me in terms of working with what I call accidental meat, roadkill, essentially, is, if you don't have somewhere to hang something like that, and you found something really, really fresh, like, how are you going to tenderise it? Like, it's quite difficult. But I've discovered that it's just so amazing. You can cut big joints or bone it and put the whole lot in there. It can be as fresh as anything, and do it in there for an hour.
Oh yeah, so you're pressure cooking, just cooking the
It
food.
completely tenderises it. Completely tenderises it.
Well, it's also much more efficient in terms of heat, because when you enclose the heat like that, you're not losing the heat through the pan lid. Pressure cooking has gone out of fashion, but it is actually a much more economical way of using heat. Should we go back in the larder? I wanted to say actually, because one of the important things about larders is that larders, there's an interesting architectural history. Larders used to be a real middle class aspiration to have a larder. They fell out of house design over the last couple of decades. Last 3 or 4 decades rather. But this is the north face of the house. It's a shaded, dark corner of the house. It's well ventilated with windows that are permanently open and with fly-proof grill on the outside. And that means it's the coldest possible part of the house without any artificial refrigeration. And before everyone had big fridges, big freezers, have you just dribbled on my salami?
I found one I hadn't burnt.
Well, I actually use vinegar to wipe that mould off, so I reckon Lactofermented juice does the same job.
Yeah,
so thank you. What should we look at next? The dried tomatoes. These are a real favourite. Not in oil, like people often buy them. We call them tomatanas.
So someone's saying there is no sound.
Oh shit.
No sound?
Yeah.
How can that be?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Well, while you try and sort out the technology,
There should be sound.
shall I just do mimes?
Yeah, go on. Can I mine?
Dried tomatoes, look.
Sound is fine.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
good.
I went to a skip, and I got it was about 20 punnets of Morrison's best vine tomatoes. Well, I've done them like this as well. But really, really crisp.
These are all homegrown, but big ones as well, sliced thin and then laid out. And for kids, that instead of a crisp, that is pure tomato.
But it's so sweet. It's so sweet.
Like intense. I absolutely love it. Dried mushrooms, obviously. Last year was a good year, so I've got all of them. That whole thing stuffed full of dried mushrooms. They are the best. My favourite thing. How about we talk about vinegar?
Yeah, how about we talk about vinegar? And actually, I'm going to say one thing about that, just because we talked about how important working with yeast bacteria can be. Vinegar is going to be an example, but it's just, this was funny because I got this yesterday and it's kind of related because I used to make a lot of kombucha, which is essentially a vinegar mother. It's a SCOBY, a symbiotic colony of organic bacteria. I don't know how to turn off the I tried to do it this morning. But anyway, years ago I spontaneously generated a wonderful SCOBY out of some cherry plum juice that I just left in the bucket in the garden and forgot about. So this year I'm going to try and do the same again. So what I got there yesterday was some birch sap that I got about 3 weeks ago, but I've just left it out there. I didn't go and collect it. And it was full of full of yeast. It was kind of white, it was milky, there was like mouldy bits on there, that looked a bit worrying. But I strained it off. I put some concentrated elderberry juice in there and some birch syrup, and I'm just going to see what happens. You know, it might not work, but I really want to see if I can spontaneously generate one SCOBY this year. So, vinegar.
Vinegar, right. That is again a mixture of tame and wild food. We produce a lot of cider here. Anyone who's been to our cider pressing weekends, big open day. We go around all the local villages and gardens. We get lots and lots of apples, shape people's trees, bring them back here. We have one of the loveliest weekends in the year. It's something that happens, it's an annual event. And the result of that is several hundred litres of apple juice. Some of that apple juice is drunk fresh, obviously. Some of it is, it's essentially the same as canning. We put them in bottles, we put the bottles in a water bath, we bring it just to pasteurisation temperature, so you're not cooking it, just to pasteurisation temperature, about 68 degrees centigrade, cap them off, and we're drinking apple juice that is nearly 7 months old, and is just like fresh apple juice. That is it's a taste of autumn.
So I would just do this with elderberry juice as well, or something like that.
Any juice, bottling it, water bathing it, and capping it off. It's the best stuff in the world. Anything that doesn't, sorry.
Yep, just, are you going to say about turning that into vinegar?
Turning it via cider.
Yeah, exactly. I was just saying, before Tristram says about that, that one way, particularly if you're bringing this back to wild food, so one way you can make vinegars is you've got a delicious vinegar like the one that Tristram's going to describe in a minute. Cider vinegar, white wine vinegar, and you can get dandelions, you can get seaweeds, you can get roots, and you can just infuse them in there to get the flavour. So you've got dandelion vinegar. But what I really love to do, and I don't know, it's not really more purist, but it just seems to, I like the process, I like a process. So what I like to do is make something like dandelion wine, seaweed wine, elderberry wine, and then just let it go off, let the magic happen, and turn it into vinegar. So then you have, I know, for me that just feels nicer than just infusing the things into a ready-made vinegar. But anyway, the basic way of
is just leaving it. Basically,
that's it.
You've got apple juice, you've pressed it. We put the apple juice into kegs with an airlock, and that means that the yeasts are in an anaerobic environment and will produce alcohol with the sugars in the apple juice. So then you've got cider, and we produce several hundred litres of that every year. It's amazing, it's free, it's just the purest alcohol that I've ever drunk. If you then take one of those barrels of cider and leave the lid off and just put a cloth in so the flies don't get in the way, what results is airflow, and that will then naturally, you can see the growth at the bottom, that is a vinegar mother, turning my cider into cider vinegar. Cider vinegar we obviously use for salad dressings and the rest of it, but as everyone knows, it is one of the most reliable pickling agents. Lactofermentation, it dribbles everywhere, it stinks sometimes, it goes wrong. Something in vinegar is just almost indestructible. These are my cucumbers from last year, got more cucumbers and herbs there, did several different recipes. One of my favourite new things last year was doing French beans, the green beans in vinegar. That's a bit of lactofermentation. Well, maybe we did this in one in brine, did we, Sarah? Or was it, some of them we did a kind of combo effect. There's clearly some degree of fermentation there.
That'd be
we
great.
need to burp it, don't we?
We do. Because otherwise it's going to dribble all over my my lovely jars. It's terrible.
And vinegar obviously is the key preserving agent in chutneys, and we use apple juice that has been colonised by wild yeast. We don't add any yeast, this is wild yeast, it's out there in the environment, and it turns everything that you want into every form of preserved good. It's the best stuff.
Can we, because we're probably coming up for like an hour, I reckon, soon. I don't want to go too much over, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. But what I'd like to show you now is, and I'm hoping we can combine this with a couple of bits of salami or something. But I'm going to just show you for a couple of minutes, because it's so quick, how to knock up a salsa verde. And we go into the conservatory where we're growing, and maybe we'll meet you there in a couple of minutes, and we can...
You want to take a little snack out?
Yeah.
I'm going to just mention one other incredibly valuable preserving agent, and that is lard. This is animal fat of every different description, sheep, pig. You can sink food into that lard.
I've in my mother's cellar, there's about 10 jars of bad
That's
fat.
what you want. You want all this fat, deep fry, but also preservation.
It's so good.
Sunk-in fat are incredible. So that's it. Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's
Snapshot.
That's a snapshot of the story of the amazing larder. So Tristram's just going to grab a few bits, and we're going to see him outside and talk about growing as well. Which is also wonderful with wild foods. You can gather seeds and then you can grow some of the plants if you're not picking them wild. But come out and have a look over here, and I'll show you what I picked earlier. So I just got some nettles. Yes, the south thistle. We got some common sorrel. We've got some dandelion leaf. We've got some ribwort plantain. We've got some cleavers, the one that sticks to you. We got a couple of dock leaves. We've got loads of wild garlic, and I've kind of washed this, so there's, oh my god! Ah! What's that? It's a slug! Maybe I didn't wash it as well as I thought. No, it's quite funny. I had a basket on the side earlier, and a little voice said, "What's in your basket, Fergus? Like, have you left anything in your basket?" And I looked, and some mischief maker had put this wonderful, I must say, kind of rubbery slug in there. But no, these have been washed very well. So all I'm going to do is, we got some lime leaves as well. And I don't mean citrus lime, I mean Tilia genus, lime tree. Did I say oxeye daisy? So the thing I like about this is like some of the stems of the wild garlic might be getting a bit tough, so I've mainly picked the leaf. The ribwort plantain, it can be a little bit fibrous, so, you know, even the sticky willy, you know, it can be, or the goosegrass, it can be, the eating experience can be a little kind of catching in the throat because of the hooky hairs. But when you kind of chop it, like I'm going to, and blitz it, you don't have any problems with those things. Oh, I should say, by the way, because this is such a lovely thing, if you're out picking wild garlic, what's really lovely, and we'll talk about a little bit about the salt picking of these, I'll show you some I've got ready, but you pick this is such a lovely part that this is often the case with wild plants, whether it be a dandelion, where you're going for like the basal leaves that are kind of in the grass or just kind of in the shade out of the sun, or I'm thinking Alexander's, like the lower stem. It's this kind of white bit which hasn't got the sun on it. It's so tender and sweet. Right, now we're going to go in there as well. The nettles, there we are, nettles in there. You're looking at the floor. That floor has been wonderfully cleaned. Any questions?
No. What's badger fat like, Fergus?
Badger fat? But once you've rendered it, I mean, the way I do it in multiple changes of boiling water. So basically, I'm liquidizing it with water because that breaks the fat out, the specialist fat cells that it's often held in. Depending on what part of the bag you've taken the fat from, but it's often like that. So you need to break it up and blitz it with boiling water, squeeze it through a cloth so you've got all that, like the cells, so then you've just got the fat. Then I have it in the boiling water and I whisk it, and then I leave it to cool. It sets on the top, I break it, I tip off the water. I do that about 10 times to get the unwanted flavours out. And then it's generally okay, but there's still a hint of weirdness in it, to be honest. So deer, I mean, if you find a deer, I found a deer in winter, roadkill deer, accidental meat, if you like, and just the back fat from that, you know, it's a much better flavour. And I've got jars and jars of that, just like Tristram showed you. So I'll do that.
And there's someone asking, my garden is full of self-seeded lettuces. Can I preserve these?
Self-seeded lettuces. Now, would that be... are we talking about wild lettuce, or are we talking about cultivated lettuce? I'll put a bit of garlic. So, wild lettuce, if we're talking about wild lettuce, it's very bitter. And actually, what we haven't talked about much is, have a look at this. So, this is another way of preserving. So this is dried wild plants that have then been vacuum sealed. In fact, this is 150 different wild greens that I gathered last April. I've dried it, I've vacuum sealed it. So another storage method. Now this has actually got quite a lot of wild lettuce in it, but it's balanced out.
It's cultivated.
With lots of other greens, so you don't get a piece. Cultivated, it's kind of interesting. I don't know much about that. I can't see any reason why, you can't. I wonder if when it self-seeds, it's kind of more bitter the second time round, because it's starting to get a bit wild. I don't know, but I like bitter. So this, I'm just going to put in there with a little bit of lemon juice. We're going to see if there's a sieve up here. No. In the meantime, Sarah, right, in a second. Little sip. Get the seeds out. How are we doing time? For an hour, yeah?
It's an hour now.
Has it? It hasn't stopped?
No.
Oh, interesting.
It will soon.
Now, a bit of lemon juice. So this works with just a random collection of wild greens. But it's good, I think, to have a base of things that really are delicious, such as wild garlic and nettles. There we go. Lemon juice. Let's see what happens. This will be the day it doesn't work, perhaps. Let's see. So now that that's getting quite liquid, I can add some more. I can add all of it. All in there. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of liquid. Actually, because I haven't put any salt in there, Sarah, I'm going to... You good? Yeah, so this is a kind of stuck fermentation of lactofermentation, and I think part of the reason I've always made it with sea salt, and we'd run out. And what was the salt you used, Sarah? It was just kind of generic table salt that might have had preservatives.
Yeah, not sea salt.
So I don't know if that's why it hasn't fermented, or because I took over and started putting loads of salt in it. It's too salty. But either way, what I'm going to do with this, to kind of save this and get it working, I'm probably going to get some more wild garlic, or more likely, because it's easier now, I just go in the garden and I'll get a whole load of ribwort plantain, and I'll use the same quantity of leaves and combine it, and it should start again if the problem is too much salt. Anyway, last piece of it. Still needs a tiny bit more. Almost there. That's more like it. So you could put olive oil in there, adjust it to yeah, delicious. Delicious. I'll take that out. Tristram. A couple of plates. Well, I'll just show you what I was doing with the elderflower. Come and look at in the, because what we haven't talked about much, but I mentioned it, is freezing obviously is a way of preserving. So, yeah, there's no Sarah's smiling. I think you're either thinking, what are you thinking? What I'm thinking, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, God, now that Sarah's looking, I'm glad there's no unwanted smells coming out. So, this is what I have every day, which is Seabuckthorn berries that are frozen. And stick that in there with the strong elderflower I made earlier. I don't use the garlicky green one. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way, rather than adding all the elderflower at the same time, is because, you'll see, it's the wild food workout. Because I think when you're working with wild food, you learn about all the parts, all the nutritious parts. And in terms of Seabuckthorn, which is available really from beginning of September, Seabuckthorn berries, that is. The leaves are good too for tea. Seabuckthorn berries is you've got the fruit, but you've also got the seeds. So what I do, I don't waste the seeds because they're full of really lovely, nutritious oil. And look, there's some. So yeah, I guess when you're working with these things, you soon develop the kind of mindset of not wasting anything. So we've got the seeds of Seabuckthorn, which I'll use, and these ones, which are dry. And put that on there. I'm going to add, because it's so intense, I'm going to add a spoonful of honey. Whee! Nice spoonful of honey. So this is a lovely thing to just have every day, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't dried the elderflowers, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't picked the Seabuckthorn berries at the perfect time and frozen them. And
Someone is asking, do you grow Seabuckthorn or forage it?
I foraged all the Seabuckthorn, and you can get the plants from nurseries, but I believe you have to have, and I really love this ratio, it's something like 5 females to 1 male to get a successful cropping plant. Isn't that a good ratio?
It's like here.
So there we are. That's just heating nicely. Let's go and join Tristram outside. Get my favourite mug. Where is it? Where's the giant one? Yeah. Wow, look at these colours we have. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Oh, and can you get those, Sarah?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go and join Tristram. Watch out for the boots. Joe, this is Joe's boots. Like, thoughtless housemates. Like, you know, what's he thinking? Although, funnily, my sister sent me a picture of some slippers by a chair by a fireplace the other day with the caption "Spontaneous human combustion," which always used to terrify me as a child. Like, kind of pictures of that. Maybe that's what happened to Joe. I mean, it could have done. I'm very sad because he's a wonderful housemate. But he could have just combusted and left his boots there. So.
Sweet corn, cabbages, Brussels, broccoli, cucumbers, chard, more cucumbers, celery, more tomatoes, peppers, carrots. You name it. But aside from just a few greens there's nothing to actually eat. And that is why pickles and preserves.
But just because you said it, and you put the challenge there, you name it, I will name it. Because we know one of the best things in here is these wonderful squashes.
The triffids, also known as triffids,
are going to grow.
Literally, you cannot walk the half of this area that is allocated to Fergus's squashes. You cannot walk through here without bumping your head on some massive elongated phallus of a squash or huge pumpkins that hang from the ceiling. It is quite special.
Because I would say a lot of this growing, I mean, it's wonderful, particularly if you've got the chance to do it. And actually, I mean, you might not be in kind of lockdown in just a room. I think someone was in a room in Berlin and he kind of walked through and just showed a few plants that he was growing in flower pots on his windowsill. I mean, that's sometimes all the room you need. So, got some black rice noodles, some salsa verde, some, what else we got? Some salt pickled wild garlic buds. What's that there, Tristram?
This you have the pickled beans in another form, the piccalilli, and I couldn't leave off the ketchup, which we also made about 20-something. Sarah, that was a collaborative effort, but yes, you did definitely put it in the pan.
And this, and also, I mean, stir. It's not a product placement. It's stir. It's just stir.
Yeah, sorry, that is toast ale made out of waste bread turned into beer. During the crisis, every bottle you buy online feeds a vulnerable person with a meal that they much need. And then, of course, you've got the sausage. You've got some venison sausage there, roadkill venison, and food waste fed.
Well, it's not that soft. We were feeling this earlier. And we're
No, this one's done. Yeah.
Oh, this one's done. Yeah.
Look.
So,
I think I was going to put more garlic in it.
in
In the sausage. It's not got as much kind of.
you know the solution to that.
Well, garlic. Thank you very much.
More garlic.
Never tasted this salsa verde.
Put some more on. Wait.
Oops.
So just before we say goodbye, is there any questions? It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fresh.
Oh, really good. You got some peace to enjoy our meal.
Well, I think I would say cheers. Seabuckthorn and elderberry cheers. Thanks very much to Tristram for sharing his knowledge of storing, which
I
was
wish I could share my salami.
wonderful. And we wish we could share all of this with you, but hopefully we've shared in terms of some ideas and inspiration for kind of making the most out of both wild foods and cultivated foods, because often making the most out of them is learning how to preserve and store them. So, see you next time. Hopefully.